Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today for our webinar, Email Reporting, Get the Scoop on What Those Numbers Mean. My name is Jill Bastian, and I'm the Training and Education Manager here at Vertical Response. And today I'm going to take you through information about the numbers from the reporting that you get on your email, plus some ways to get those up. Just a couple things before we get started. First of all, this webinar will be probably around 40 minutes long. At the end, there will be time for Q&A. So if you do think of questions along the way, go ahead and type those into the box that you see in your GoToWebinar window, and I'll be happy to answer as many of those questions as I can at the end of the webinar. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. First of all, this is what we're going to go through today. And I know that the webinar is entitled What Those Numbers Mean. But part of understanding the numbers and how to change the numbers that you see in your reporting is testing. So we're going to go through some testing, and then we're going to talk about what average open, click-through, bounce, and unsubscribe rates are, and what you can do to change those. And as I said, there is time for Q&A at the end. So first of all, before we dive into all of the numbery stuff, we're going to look at some of the things to keep in mind before you start testing. And as I said, testing is going to become a pretty important part of understanding what you can do with the reporting numbers. So we're going to give you a lot of information today about that. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind is, what is it that you want to test? So are you happy with your open rate, but you want to try to improve your click-through rate? Do you want to change your open rate? Do you want to change your conversion rate? So think about what it is in the reporting that you want to change. And really, in order to understand this, you need to have some kind of a benchmark to work from. And what I mean by this is you have to have at least sent out some emails and have at least an average of what your current open rate is, what your current click-through rate is. So that way, once you start looking at the things that you want to change, you can see what's having an impact and how your numbers are going to be changing. So you need to have at least a starting point from what you've already sent out. And that's pretty easy. You could go into the reporting of your emails and create an average of what your opens and click-through rates are. When you're testing, you want to have a control. It's a little bit like working in a lab. You need to have a control. So what you would normally send out versus what you want to test. So if you're testing a subject line, use the subject line that you would normally use and then test against that a new idea or something different and see which one is going to win out. You also only want to test one thing at a time, and it might be tempting to want to do more than one, but if you're trying to change your open rate or you're trying to change your click-through rate and you're changing a number of things in your email, you're not going to know which one thing is having the biggest impact or if something's actually causing a downplay in your numbers. So test one thing at a time so you can see what is having an impact and then move on to testing something else. And of course, you want to send the emails at the same time, your testing emails. Otherwise, things like the time of day or the day of the week can impact the numbers that you're looking at as well. Unless, of course, what you're testing is the day of the week, and then, of course, you wouldn't do it at the same time. But otherwise, if you're testing subject line, click-through, conversion, you're going to want to send your emails at the same time. So you're also going to need to split your list. And one of the things that we do offer here in a Vertical Response account is our segmentation tool. It's found in the list section, and you can use it to split up your list based on whatever, or you can have us split it up into random A/B split tests, which is a marketing term. But you can split your list in half randomly using the segmentation tool so that you can test different things in your email. So you can split your list 50-50 and do a real A/B split test. If you don't want to take some risk, you can do more like a 70-30 and test, send what you would normally send to 70% of your list and then do 30% with the new thing that you're testing. The list size that you start with will impact the results. We are going to be talking about numbers. So generally, when you're doing testing, you want your list to be at least 1,000. But I'm not saying that you can't test something with a smaller list. But what I am saying is that individual responses to your emails will have a greater impact if you're mailing to a smaller list. So if you're mailing to If your list is 200 and you split it in half, even if 5 people do something different with your email, that's going to have a larger impact on the results that you're seeing. So you just want to keep that in mind when you're doing some testing. Also, testing is different for everyone. So if you are talking to other people, you know, who are doing things like this, you have to keep in mind that it's your list, it's your recipients, they're going to react to things in a different way. So you need to pay attention to what you're testing and not worry so much about what everybody else is doing. You're also going to want to do tests multiple times. Testing a different day of the week, for example, is one time is not going to give you the final result. There could be any number of reasons why you would have a different result. So you want to test a few times to make sure that what you're seeing isn't an anomaly, but that is actually how people are reacting to your email. Again, you don't want to test too many things at once, and you don't want to divide your list too much. And really the reason for that is if you divide your list too much, you're going to start getting smaller chunks of your list, and you might have less impactful results. So let's dive into the numbers. So as I said, we are going to talk about some numbers today. So we're going to start with the open rate. And the open rate is one of the things that people really look at a lot for their email marketing. You want to keep in mind there's a lot of things that go into getting people to open your email in the first place, and there are things that can prevent the open from being tracked. So we would normally recommend that you measure a number of things to check and find the engagement. So open rate for sure is important, but you also want to see what's happening with your click-through rate, what's happening with your conversions. Even see what happens on your website once you send out an email. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind here. But the open rate is defined as the number of emails that were opened, and it's calculated in the method that you see here on the slide. Excuse me. So it's the total number of emails that were opened divided by the total number that were sent. And so that is how vertical response, and this is a typical calculation for most ESPs, this is how the open rate is found for pretty much anyone you're looking at. Again, you need to keep in mind that an open is only going to be tracked if the email has images turned on, which means if someone receives the text version of your email, or if they read your email without turning on the images, if the images are blocked in their email program but they don't turn them on, then the open will not be tracked. Obviously, that doesn't mean they're not reading it, which is why you want to keep in mind engagement is important. People clicking on links, people going to your website and taking actions after you've sent out an email. Because some people don't turn on images, they'll still read your email. One of the things you want to keep in mind with this, when you're sending your emails, if you're using alt text on your images, that can help get people to open it with the images on or turn the images on so that you can at least get an open tracked. So these are typical open rates for different types of lists. So if you're mailing to somebody who said, sure, send me things if they wanted to download something from your website, say a white paper, they're a prospect, those tend to be a little bit lower just because they might have just given you their email address, not because they were necessarily interested in what your company or organization is offering, but they were interested in a resource that you had. So those tend to be a little bit lower. B2B is a little bit higher. B2C is between 15 to 20%. That number has been slowly dropping over the last few years. That doesn't mean anything necessarily bad. The increase in people reading emails on their phones, and not all phones are smart, so I think that is part of why the number seems to be a little bit lower, because it isn't being tracked as an open. That doesn't mean less people are reading their email. So these are what the averages are. And we also have nonprofit up there as well. Again, these are averages. There is nothing in here that's necessarily taking into account the age of the list, how often the list has been mailed to, the size of the list, any of those type of things, or even really industries other than B2B or B2C or nonprofit. So if your number isn't in this average, that's okay. We're going to tell you some information here on how to get that number up. So one of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're creating and sending out your emails is you want to send the information that your recipients were promised when they signed up. So the information that they're looking for from your company is what you want to continue to send them. If they signed up to receive emails about your gardening business, don't send them emails about horses if that isn't what they're interested in or whatever. One of the things you can try to do is to get them to put your from email address in their address book. That can help depending on the email client. It can help with delivery. It can also help with rendering images in some of them. But also it really helps with delivery so that your email is in the inbox for sure. Also, the from label is important. This is one of the things that will get people to open your email, and it's one of the first two things that they see and decide if they're going to open their email. The from label tells them who's sending it, and the subject line tells them why they should open your email. So you need to spend a little time thinking about those things. The from label generally should be your company or organization. This is not really a good place to put a person's name. You can, and that is certainly something you could test if you wanted to test which your recipients respond to more, but people tend to remember a company name and will recognize it quicker than they would a person's name, which is why you generally want to stick with your company name. As I said, the subject line is really important, and so you want to keep in mind what people are going to see. Subject lines are, there's a limit depending on the email client people are using to 40 to 50 characters. So you want to be really careful about what you're putting in your subject lines, and we certainly have done a lot about subject lines in the past. We have our recorded subject line savvy webinar, and we have a guide on subject lines. So I'm not going to go into huge details here, but one of the things to keep in mind, which you can see in this example, is not to repeat your from label, because they will already have seen that in the from label, and it's limited space. So make sure your subject line is going to be really catchy to make them want to open your email. You also have to remember the preview pane and have the important information above the fold, as you can see here in my example, which will help encourage people to continue to want to open your email if what they're looking for is there at the top. So these are some of the things that you can test to try to get your open rate up. Now, as I just said, there is a limit for most email programs as to how much text or how many characters they show in the subject line, which is about 40 to 50. But you can test what your recipients respond to. You can have a longer subject line, 50 characters, versus one that's much shorter, and see if one of those things get them to want to open that email. You can also, if you're sending out an email with some kind of a promotion, you can try doing something like this example here, 50% off versus half off. So the different words can have an impact on how your recipients understand what the deal is. You can also try personalizing your subject line. You know, it could say something like, Jill, save 30% this weekend. Again, it's something that you're going to want to test and make sure that you're using it in a way that the personalization makes sense in the subject line. I've seen it where people will just tack it on at the end, and it doesn't make sense, and it seems like they're just throwing that in there. But you want to test it because this is something that people might feel is a little big brotherish. So you don't want to just all of a sudden start putting people's names in the subject line, and you might find that your open rate drops off. So test that one. You can do a clear call to action versus a description of what your offer is. You can change it based on your audience. So if you have your list segmented into engaged audience versus maybe a leads audience, you can change your subject line and see if you get different results. You know, maybe you have a list of non-responders. Change the subject line from what you would normally send to something different and see if you can get more of them into reading your email. You can also try using a sense of urgency. So test something like sale through the weekend versus sale and Sunday. With the sale and Sunday, there's a sense of finality in that, and so maybe that will get more people interested in what's going on in your email. You can also test, there's a lot to test with your opens, so we have quite a few slides here. You can test the frequency of the send. So Maybe if you're mailing once a month, you might want to try mailing twice a month. If you're mailing once per quarter, you might want to try mailing monthly. Now, I have an asterisk next to this one. I could probably put it in red as well. There is nothing wrong really with testing your frequency of send, but the important thing is when people sign up to get emails from you, if you tell them that you're going to mail once a month and then you suddenly start mailing them once a week, that could cause an issue with unsubscribes, which you don't want to do. We're going to talk about that later. And also you could see the open rate drop off if you're mailing too frequently. So what I would normally recommend, especially if you're going to change your frequency of send in the fourth quarter of the year, just let your recipients know. You know, it's like we have so much information we're finding mailing once a month just isn't giving you all of the great content we think you'd enjoy, so we're going to change it to twice a month. That way your recipients know what to expect. You're managing their expectations. If you're going to change your mailing plan in the fourth quarter of the year, just let them know it's only going to be for that time frame during the holidays, and then you'll go back to your normal mailing if that's something that you're going to be doing. But that can also help with your open rate, especially if you're mailing less than once a month. Sometimes people will forget that they've signed up to get your emails if you mail infrequently, so sending more than once a month, or sending at least once a month, is a good way to stay there. You can test the day and time that you're sending out your email. Most people send their emails Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Those are the days people are in the office and reading their email. So those are the days most people are mailing. You can, however, test sending on another day or time because, of course, everybody knows these are the days that people are sending emails, and so your email is going to be in the inbox with others. So maybe testing another day, or maybe testing sending your email later in the day, you might find that you have a different open rate from that. As I said, you could test your from name. Generally, company name is the one that you want to stick with, but you can test using a person's name. And then pre-header, which is the first line of text in your email, is something that you can also test. Some email programs will pull in the first line of text in your email to be part of the subject line. Not all of them do it. So you want to think about what the first line of text is. And a lot of times it's click here to view email in a browser, because that's the first line of text that's up at the very top of the email. You might want to think about moving that link and adding some different information at the top of the email that might get people to want to open your email. Don't repeat your subject line, but do something that goes with your subject line that might help get them to want to open the email. So here's an example. Vertical Response did some testing. If you get our Buzz email, we test a lot. You may not know it because you only get one version, but we do a lot of testing. So last year we did a test for our VR 10th anniversary, and so we tested some subject lines on one of our emails. The one on the left says get 50% off email credits up to 1,000, and the one on the right says get your VR 10th birthday gift. So they both are saying that we're giving something, but one specifically says what we're giving. The from label is the same. It was sent at the same time and day of the week, and so the result was this one had a 3.8% lift in open rate, and what I mean is there was more people opening this, so 3.8% higher open rate, and it actually generated a lot more revenue than the other one, even though the content of the email was the same. This is one of my favorite things that I subscribe to in the marketing department, and it's called Which Test One. It's by Ann Holland. You can sign up to get an email, and she sends out an email where people are doing testing. Sometimes they test content on websites, and sometimes it's emails, but content testing in emails is just like content testing on a website. So it is really interesting, and it's free. I would definitely encourage you guys to sign up if you're interested in testing. But this company here did a test in their subject line, and they tested the subject line on the left versus the one on the right. And it may be hard to see on the screen, but the one on the right is in all caps, which is something we would normally not encourage people to do because, you know, online it's shouting. So the winner was actually the one that everyone says not to do, using all caps. They had a 13.8% higher open rate and 30% more clicks within the email. So this is one of the reasons you want to do testing. Just changing something in your subject line can change your open rate. So let's take a look at the click-through rate. Again, this is one of the things that you want to pay attention to. If you can't just pay attention to the open rate, since there are so many things that can impact tracking the open rate. The click-through rate is the percent of unique recipients who click on a link in your email. When you're looking at the reporting in your vertical response account, there are two different calculations that you're going to see, and we make it easy for you to see this. First of all, we're going to give you one link click-through rate. So if you look at the image on the right there, we'll track on that dashboard all the links. We'll show you which links we're tracking, and then on the right we'll show you how many times each of those links were clicked. But when you look at the top of the email, your click-through rate is all of the links averaged together. So if we're tracking for one link, it's the same type of calculation. It's the total number of clicks on the link divided by the number of emails sent. All of the links together would be the total number of clicks on all of your links divided by the number of emails sent. You also have to remember sometimes people don't click on links even though you have them there, but that doesn't mean that they don't go to your website. They could just open up a browser, type in your URL, and go to your website. So you want to watch for increased traffic after you send out your email. These are some typical click-through rates, and again, it's the same breakdown that I had before, and all my numbers, by the way, come from the DMA, if you're wondering where they came from. Prospect mailings, again, are going to be lower because those are people who are not specifically engaged with your company yet. On this one, B2B and B2C are pretty close on the click-through rate, and nonprofits are just a little bit lower for the numbers. And again, there are things you can do to change those. So if your numbers aren't around there, that doesn't mean that's bad. So you want to take a look at the big picture. Take a look at where you're putting your links, how many links you have in your email. So keep track of the performance of the different types of links and see if there is something that seems to be doing better or not, and then you can figure out which you want to test in your email. You also want to keep in mind how your email is constructed. And as I said earlier, talking about opens, keeping important information above the fold when you're looking at a preview, you want to have links in there as well. That's the most important part of your email. That is where people decide how much more they're going to read. They'll read that top part, and that is what's going to inspire them to move on into your email. So give them plenty of links in there so that they can get to your website when you want them to go there. Having one or two links may not be enough depending on the information in your email and how long your email is. Also make sure that the information in the email is relevant to what they're expecting, and you want to make sure that it's clear what they're supposed to do. I say call to action button here. This is one of the things we talk about a lot, but telling people what to do and using a button that they can click on to go do it is a great way to get them to interact with your email. Call to action buttons are pretty effective, and we're going to take a look at that in just a minute. But make sure you're clear about what you want them to do. If you have a lot of things going on in your email, they may not understand that they're supposed to go and make a purchase if they can't find a link when you're telling them to go make a purchase. So just make sure that when you're looking at your email and how the links are working in there, that it's all working together. When you're using your email lists, double opt-in emails lists have a tendency to be a little more responsive to the emails than single opt-in. If you're using our opt-in form, your vertical response opt-in form, it is a double opt-in. Because they have to go through 2 steps to be added to your list, then they are obviously very interested in what's going on. We don't require double opt-in to use our system, so you might actually see a difference though in your lists if you're using a different way to get people to opt in if they're signing up at a trade show or something. Targeting your lists are also very effective. And I touched on this a little bit when I was talking about the opens, about having different types of lists, the engaged list, the non-responder list, the leads list. You can also have lists based on people who have different interests. So for example, if you're a winery, you could have a list of people who like Chardonnay, people who like Merlot or Pinot. And then you can send them specific messaging. So, hey, we're having a sale on Chardonnay, and send that to the people who enjoy Chardonnay. And those are the people who are going to be much more interested in the information that you're sending to them because they've already told you that's what they like. So by targeting your lists, you can have a higher engagement rate. And of course, link images. I talk about this a lot, but sometimes people forget to do that. So make sure your images are linked. And that way your recipients can click on them. Most of them know that they can click on a link. I'm sorry, they can click on an image and go somewhere. Just make sure you put them where they expect to go, otherwise they're not going to want to click on your pictures anymore. So some of the things that you can test for your links, you can test a text link versus a button. So if you look on the right-hand side there, I have a text link at the bottom right, and I have a button at the top. So that's what I mean by a text link. It's just text that's been linked. You can test the placement of either a call to action button or your link. You can test the number of call to actions. This one, however, I would be very careful about. If you have more than 2, some people might get confused about what the email is about or what they're supposed to be doing with the information in the email. But you can test the number of call to actions. You can also test the phrasing of your link. So if you're using a button or if you're using a link, a text link, test what it says. So on this example you see on the screen, find out more is on both of them, but you could test something different in the link itself versus what the button says. So you can test how you're asking people to click. And we did testing. We did this test probably 2 years ago. We decided to see if buttons were more effective, and we found out they were. Now, this was in our own test, so your recipients may not respond this way, but we had a 26% increase in our click-through rate just by including buttons in the email for people to click on. So keep that in mind. If you're not using buttons, you might want to think about adding call to action buttons. We do have a free button making tool. So if you go to buttons.verticalresponse.com, you can make your own button, and you can put your own text and all of that information in the button itself, and we'll give you an image, and you can use that in your email. And that's free, so you can test out your recipients clicking on buttons too. Buttons are pretty compelling though. I think most people would find an increase in click-through rates. It's really hard not to click on a button if you see one in there. So you can also do a test for what is in the email itself. So you can test your content and see how people are interacting with your content. And this could, again, impact click-through rate. This can also impact conversions. So you can do some more testing here. It could, down the line, also impact your opens as well as people start getting used to the different type of content you have. So you can test having longer copy versus short copy. And ordinarily, we would recommend shorter copy because it's hard to read a lot online, and that way people can, if you include a link where they can go read more, they can read what they want, and then if they're interested, they can continue on. You can test using testimonials in your email versus not having testimonials. I like testimonials, and I tend to respond well to them myself, but maybe not everybody does, so that's something that you can test. You can test the email layout where you have different information. That's one of the things we've been testing lately in our VR Buzz. You might have noticed a change in how the email itself is laid out. You can also test graphics in your email and see if there's different things that people respond to in the graphics. Again, click-through rate and conversions, and down the line, eventually open rates can be affected by all of this. So this is a test that we did. We were doing a sale, and so we sent an email with the same offer and almost the same text. The subject line was exactly the same. It was the same offer, and the pre-header text was the same as well. It was sent at the same day and the same time. So the only thing we changed was the content. So if you look on the right-hand side, we have a graphic that says buy 5,000 email credits and get 25,000 free. And on the left, we have get the deal, $60, and you get, it's the same thing, you get 5,000 credits for 2,500, or you get 2,500 for free, but we have different graphics, and it's slightly different the way it looks. So we tested this and we found the winner was this one. Not as catchy. I love the balloon graphic, but this one I think just said it straight out what the offer was, and I think people responded to it more. The open rates were the same, which is what we would expect. They were sent at the same time, and it was the same subject line and the same pre-header text. This one had 24% more clicks. As I said, content can change that, and 21% more revenue. Again, content can change your conversions as well. So again, it's kind of fun to test what people respond to more, how you state your offer, or even just the graphics within the offer itself. So the bounce rate, we're going to cover the two scary ones now. Well, maybe not scary, but the least glamorous ones. So the bounce rate are the emails that were unable to be delivered for whatever reason. And it's calculated much like the other ones. It's the number of addresses that were non-deliverable divided by the number of emails sent. Oh, you know what? I also forgot to mention on the click-through rate. You're just going to have to jot this down. On the click-through rate, Vertical Response and most ESPs calculate the click-through rate as the number of clicks divided by number of emails sent. There are a couple of ESPs that calculate them the number of clicks divided by the number of opens, which will obviously give you a higher number. So if somebody's saying that their click-through rate is 25%, they're probably calculating it in the other way. That's not a standard calculation. The standard is to divide by the number of emails sent, not opened, for the click-through rate. But occasionally you'll see some crazy click-through rates. And unless somebody's giving away a free iPad, the link is probably not going to be clicked by a quarter of the people who receive the email. So that's just something to keep in mind with the click-through if you're looking at numbers online. So there are two types of bounces that are going to be tracked. A hard bounce is a bad address. So the domain doesn't exist anymore. The email address doesn't exist anymore. Maybe there's just a typo in there and it doesn't exist. It never existed. For some reason, there's no way to deliver to it. The email address doesn't exist. A soft bounce is an email that is returned because although the address exists, for some reason it can't be delivered. Normally it's because the inbox is full or something's going on with the mail server and we can't get through. We try to deliver an email for 3 days, and the hard bounce usually happens right away. If it's a soft bounce, if we can't deliver after 3 days but it's not a bad address, the soft bounce we just mark on the back end, but you can still mail to it because that's usually a temporary issue. So the next time you mail, you should be able to mail to them. The hard ones are the type of bounce information we get back, and we'll mark those right away as a bounce. And these are the typical rates, and this is not broken down by different types of mailing, but as how frequently your list is mailed. And this is pretty important, how often you're mailing your list. So if you mail on a regular basis, your bounce rate should be pretty low. Because you're mailing on a regular basis, it may be like 1 or 2 addresses that might go bad if you're mailing at least once a month. If you mail quarterly, you're going to end up having a much higher bounce rate because addresses go bad on a regular basis, but you're not mailing on a regular basis. If you're mailing to a list for the first time, you can have some pretty high bounce rates, and that can be pretty bad. If you actually had these kind of numbers, 20 to 30%, our abuse team would get in touch with you and find out why you have so many addresses that are bad. Honestly, this is probably more likely to happen if you're using a purchase list, which Vertical Response doesn't allow you to use. But some of the things that you want to keep in mind, again, if you mail on a regular basis, your recipients are going to keep you updated with information and you'll have lower bounce rates, which is one of the things that we're going to talk about here. Providing value in your email, so having great content and the information that you promised that people are signing up to get, will help keep people interested in what's going on if their email address changes. So they'll still let you know that they want to get your email and send you a new address. That's why you want to make sure that the content is great. Mailing at least once a month, again, will help you keep updated with what's going on your list. And you can also follow up with people if their address bounces. You can send them a postcard. If you have their phone number, you can even give them a call. I see a lot of people do this with postcards, though. Send your recipient a postcard and say, hey, your email address bounced. Bring this in, give us a new address, and we'll give you a discount or something like that. That way you can keep your list clean and have all the updated addresses that you want. So unsubscribes, and I'm not going to show you any ways to really test this. You don't really want to test your unsubscribe rate, and you can't really test the bounce rate, and you really don't want to test those. But I'll just give you some tips on trying to decrease all of these. So the unsubscribe rate is calculated much like what we've seen. So it'll be the number of people who click that unsubscribe link or reply with unsubscribe in the subject line, divided by the number of emails that are sent out. You can wait, it says a week, you want to wait at least 3 days to get your responses for your emails. With more and more people looking at emails on their phones, you tend to see a higher response earlier than we used to see. But still, if you wait about 3 days, you should have a good chunk of your responses in, and then you can see how all of this went. Typical unsubscribe rates for a regularly mailed list, really low. If you mail less frequently, it's going to be a lot higher. And again, if you have a high unsubscribe rate, our abuse team is going to get in touch with you, but you also want to take into consideration, why are people unsubscribing? Are you not mailing regularly? Is there information they're not looking for? So here are some of the things to keep in mind for that. Again, you only want to mail to people who have requested to get emails from you, otherwise you are going to have a high unsubscriber rate. Again, mailing at least once a month helps people remember that they're on your mailing list so that they don't mark your email as spam or click the unsubscribe link. Maybe, especially if you are a seasonal mailer, and we do have a lot of people who are seasonal, you want to remind people why they're on your mailing list. And so you can add information in the email, kind of like the example you see here, just reminding people how they signed up to be on your list. Again, keep whatever promises you've made when people signed up on the content that you said you were going to have, and your mailing frequency. If you overmail, people will start unsubscribing. And although I have been to events where I've heard people say that if your unsubscribe rate is under 5%, you're not mailing enough, I don't think that the best way to test what the limits are of your list is by getting more people to unsubscribe. You know in your own inbox your tolerance of how often you can receive an email from one company or organization. So try not to go crazy and mail daily, unless what you're mailing is something that they already know that they're going to get every day. But if you're sending out a newsletter once a month and then sending a couple of emails to more targeted lists during the month, that's probably fine. Or if you're sending a newsletter once a month, that's great. You can send special other emails as long as they are expecting that, but if you mail too much, your recipients are going to let you know by unsubscribing. Again, providing value, and we talked about this a little bit for bounces as well. Including information that your recipients look forward to. Again, you know your business really well, and sharing the information you have is going to be of value for the people on your list. So you can be the authority on whatever your business is, and people will come to you for information. Offer great deals. I mean, if you're not in a retail type of business where you have deals, you can always include a tip or some type of insider information that people really can get something of value out of. If you have some news that's going on with your company or organization, if you won an award, if you've updated a product, there's all kinds of things that you can include in the email to help keep people interested in what's going on in there. And by including information people find valuable, you'll help to establish a relationship, which is what email marketing is really all about, establishing a relationship with your customers and maintaining it. So keeping them informed on things they want will keep them from unsubscribing. So once you've sent out all your emails and you've done your testing, you can compare the results. And once you've sent your email, you can kind of see on the right-hand side there, we have a dashboard, which is an overview. But what you're going to want to do is click on the tab that says reports, and you can go to compare, and you can compare the specific emails you sent out for your test. And if you look at this part here of the screenshot, this is showing specific comparisons of specific emails. So you'll be able to see the opens, clicks, bounces, and unsubscribes for the emails that you're using in your test. So you can see right away with graphs and everything which of your emails was more impactful. So we make it pretty easy for you to take a look at that. And you can compare the lists as well. And so you can set these up and keep track of your testing and see what is working and what isn't, and then you can make adjustments to your email marketing as you go along. So a recap of some of the things that we went over. Keep an eye on your open rate, but again, you don't want to only go by what the open rate is telling you. There are people reading the email who are not being tracked as openers. So remember that engagement, the overall effectiveness of your email is much more important than just what's happening with the open rate. Keep your click-through rate high, and using a call to action button is a great way to help with that. That also, again, is giving you more engagement information about your recipients. Assess traffic to your website, and if you have a storefront, to your store as well after you've sent out an email, because again, some people can skip everything you've set up in the email and they can go straight to your website without clicking a link, or come right into your store without having clicked a link as well. So you can keep track of some other information besides just what you're seeing in clicks and opens. Of course, keep your bounces and unsubscribes low. Once you find something that works, you want to stick with that until it stops and then start testing again. Testing is something that you're going to do on an ongoing basis. If you see your open rate slipping or you see your click-through rate slipping, time to start testing, or maybe check and see. Maybe you had changed something that you hadn't intended to change and it impacted how people responded to your email. And testing, as I said, goes on forever, so never stop testing. I find it kind of fun. It's really interesting to see how people do this. Like I said, I really like the Which Test One website and email. I love to test what I think is right, and then half the time I'm right, half the time I'm wrong. So here's some resources. As I said, we had some on there. Ann Holland Which Test One is where I got a couple of the, or I got one of the examples from. It's free to sign up for her email, and you can test your own testing skills and also get inspired by some of the things that other people are doing with their own testing. Our blog has lots of information on it, blog.verticalresponse.com. We also have lots of guides, and I briefly mentioned Savvy Subject Line. So if you're wanting to test your subject line, we do have some tips in there for writing great subject lines. Also, there's some more information about reporting. There's a guide called Email Marketing Reporting Basics, which go through some of the things we talked about today. And then Testing 1, 2, 3 gives you some tips on testing. That's our button site up there, buttons.verticalresponse.com. Again, it's free, and you can create your button. You can do whatever color you want. You can put whatever text you want on it, and you can test that out in your own emails. And then there is a webinar that I did at the end of last year that goes into more testing examples. So if you wanted to see some more examples on click-throughs and content, it's called Testing Your Email and Lists for Success. Go to our help site and click on the webinars tab, and it has two of the examples I had today, but then there's a bunch of other ones in there as well if you're looking for some more inspiration on testing.